fabulous. But this one I particularly like, and the reason I like this one is for this, the 3 separate dies that come with the embossing folder. Well, there's 4. One will cut out the whole thing, and then the other 3 will cut out this flower, and this little bud here. And I just think that is a cracking idea. Absolutely fabulous. If you've watched me before, you know I like to layer my flowers up, and I did it with the wildflower spray the other week. So when I saw this, I was like, I've died and gone to heaven. This is fabulous. What a cracking idea. Right, so I'm going to make a start, because I just want to show you how fabulously these blending inks actually do blend. Now, I know that the colour palette is limited, but let me tell you that they blend so well that you will be able to make loads of other colours just by mixing and matching. They're just fabulous. So we're going to start with layer 1, and obviously you can see that I've already gone over and added the numbers to my layering stencils, and all I've done is just used a Sharpie pen and just over inked where the numbers are, and then obviously I'll put the name of the stencils on the front one, just so that at a glance I can see what it is. Now, the first thing I'm going to say to you is some of these stencils are really detailed. I think Lisa's layering stencils and embossing folders are second to none on the market. They are the best. They have so much detail in them. It's not a case of just doing 4 layering stencils to give you a better detail. These give you so much detail, you will be amazed. Those of you that have bought Lisa's layering stencils before will know exactly what I'm saying. But what I would say is some of them, because there is so much detail on them, some of them will have little pieces that will lift if you're not careful when you are adding your ink with your brushes. So bear that in mind and look at your stencils before you start your inking. So look at the pieces that might lift and make sure that you brush in that direction. Lisa does do a green, it's called Woodland Moss, but I don't want to use that green on here. I want to use a different green, so I'm going to make my own. So I'm using the yellow to start with, and the one thing I would say is these ink pads, I know they're new and they will be really juicy. You know, they've got quite a high saturation of colour on them. So when you first start, less is more. Dab off more than you think you're going to use, okay? And if you dab it off on your stencil, you can go back and pick that up and use that as well. So I'm going in with my yellow, which is, you know, leaves aren't really yellow unless they're autumn leaves and they're sort of on their way out, but you'll see why in a second. And I have to say this yellow is really lovely. If you think of like different shades of yellow that you've seen out there already, I have to say this is probably nicer than those. It's quite a juicy yellow. It's called Juicy Pineapple. Quite appropriate really, I've got to be honest. So you see here, this piece here is quite likely to lift if you go around in circles. So make sure that you brush in the direction of the stencil, just to make sure that you're not going to lift that piece, because not only will you risk bending the stencil or even ripping the stencil, your ink will be in the wrong place. So we've done the first layer with that yellow, which is beautiful. Now to make my leaves green, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add on top of that some Tranquil Waters. This is a really deep aqua type blue, which is stunning. So I'm using this Tranquil Waters, and you can see that I've taken off quite a bit of the ink on my stencil here, and then I'm adding this over the top of that yellow. So hopefully when I've added this Tranquil Waters on top of the yellow, it's going to give me a beautiful light green colour. I will just say, always, always, always remember to dab off your ink, especially while the pads are new, because they are really, really juicy, and you don't want to spoil your work. You don't want to end up with a big splodge of ink on your work because you didn't dab it off before you started. Okay. How beautiful does that look? What a super green. I just think it's incredible. They blend so, so beautifully. You definitely won't be disappointed if you've bought these, I promise you. Okay, so layer 2 we're going to go in. Now I've got a choice of colours. I think I'm going to go with pinks and purples on these, because I don't think I've done pinks and purples. I've used reds and blues, and I'm going to show you some cards that I've already done at the end, because obviously with doing all the stenciling and then talking to you about the inks as well, I'm not going to have time to put cards together. So I just wanted to already do some ready to show you at the end. And I did get a little bit carried away. I've been playing all morning, it's been fabulous. Lisa hasn't got a brown in this first release, and that was a conscious decision, because obviously, you know, when you're talking about producing new stuff like this, money is definitely a factor, cost, and I know that she agonised over which colours to leave out, because you can make brown with so many different colours. Brown was one of the ones that we left out this time. So that's my first layer with that beautiful sugar candy. That is such a beautiful pink. It's just so delicate but vibrant at the same time. I think actually I'm going to do this layer in the same, and I'm going to go a little bit heavier on this one. So again, sugar candy. I'm still going to dab off because I don't want this to sort of sit in the middle. But what I would say is start in the middle of your stencil, start in the middle of your flower, so that you blend the ink outwards, because obviously when you're looking at flowers in nature and you're looking at the flower where the sun would hit it, the petals are going to be lighter, aren't they? So if you bear that in mind when you're stenciling, then you're going to get your shading without really trying. So again, I'm starting in the middle of the flower and working the ink out. So I'm not necessarily going as heavy on the outside of the petal as I am on the inside. Okay, I just lift that up. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. I like that. Nice delicate colour, I like that. So then we're going in with number 4. Number 4 is going to give you the centre of this flower. I'm going in with my yellow for this one. Got a brush with yellow on somewhere. I'm taking a lot of the ink off, purely and simply because it's a new pad. I can always add more if I want to, but obviously once it's there you can't really take it away, so bear that in mind as well. So that's going to give me my centre of my flower. And then I'm going in with the detail on the leaves. Now again, I want a nice green, but I don't want to use the woodland moss, because for me the woodland moss is a little bit too dark. Hi Catherine, hi Margaret, hi Jan, hi Anne, hi Liz. Okay, so I'm going in with green again, but again I am going to use the yellow and the tranquil waters to make up my green, and on this occasion I'm going to go a little bit darker. So again I'm taking some of the ink off, but I am going to go quite a little bit heavier with this yellow on here, because I want this green to stand out over and above the green that I've already made before, because obviously the veins on the leaves will stand out more than the base leaf, won't they? And of course you've got the stems of the flowers as well, and they're going to be quite dark. But I think if you're watching this, I think you have to agree that these inks blend really, really beautifully. I know Lisa has agonised over them, worried about them. I really don't think she's got anything to worry about. They are amazing. Okay, so just make sure I've hit all the veins, and then what I'm going to do is go over the top of that with my Tranquil Waters. But I'm going to go not too heavy, heavy-ish, but not too heavy, just in case it's a little bit too dark. So you can see how much ink I'm taking off here, and I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this brush. It's quite light, just so that I can get a nice coverage, but I'm not going in really heavy, just in case it's a little bit too dark. As I say, you can always add it, but you can't take it away, so worth bearing in mind. Add it a bit at a time, and then you won't be disappointed. It's quite mindful, this. It's very difficult for me to, some people won't believe me, but it's very difficult for me to talk and stencil at the same time, because you do get a little bit lost in it. So I'll just lift that up and say, I'm happy with that, I like that. I think that the colours of those, being quite so delicate, match the delicate colours in the flowers for me. I just think that's really beautiful. So then I'm going to go in here with the last one, number 6. Now I'm going to go in here with the purple, because I want these centre bits to stand out quite a bit. Okay, so I'm going in with the purple, but again I'm taking off a lot of the ink on my stencil. Now you can see this is quite a dark purple. It's not really bright and vibrant, but when you put it on top of something else, it is amazing, and it just blends like a dream. And again, I've started in the middle of the flower so that I'm coming outwards with less colour, because obviously the veins are going to be lighter right on the edges of the petals. So if you start in the middle, you can work that colour outwards, and you can see I haven't added any more ink on my brush at all as yet, and I'm not going to for that flower. So I'm going to pick this up off here, and I'm going to start from the bottom on this little bud, and again work my way to those pieces on the outside. I'm going to add a little bit more ink now, and again starting in the centre and working my way outwards towards the edge of the petals. I'm going over these yellow pieces with the yellow as well, with the purple as well, partly so that I don't have to change the colour of that's on my brush, and all it is just a little bit of shadow sitting on that yellow seed pod. I don't really think it matters what colour it is. Obviously, you know, your piece of art, your choice. If you want to change it, you can. You could use a grey. I don't really think it makes too much difference, if I'm honest. Okay, and I'll leave it at that. I really like that. I think that looks really quite beautiful. Now the one thing I would say is these are the blending inks, and they are superb for doing what they do. The pigment inks are totally different, and really and truly they're not a blendable ink, but they are. They are and they aren't. Let me just get the purple, because I wasn't going to do this. So if I use the purple, the pigment, can you see how much darker that looks than this one? But it isn't, really it isn't. It's just the makeup of the pad is totally different. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of this pigment ink, only very tiny bit, and I'm going to start in the middle here, and I'm just coming out just in the very centre of that flower. Now remember, this isn't a blending ink, and I'm going to do the bottom of the bud, and I'm going to do the centre of this flower here. So remembering that this isn't a blending ink, but it's just going to give you a little bit more depth in your definition on the centres of those flowers. Now I can see that, you might not be able to because it's on camera, but if I lift it up and show you a little bit closer without it going out of focus, and just wait for my iPad to catch up with me. Okay, if I lift it up to get it as close as I can, the detail in that is just incredible, don't you think? I mean, how long has that taken me? 20 minutes? How fabulous. And thinking, you know, these aren't greens that are in the palette, these are a mix of colours. So, you know, don't think that you're limited in what you can do with the colours that you've got, because you're really not. So I just want to show you some of the samples that I've already made. So with the Blooming Marvellous, I did a few different ones, which you might have seen some of them in the group already, because people were asking for samples of, you know, the stencils and the embossing folders that are going to be on the show. People wanted to know what they look like. People wanted to see what the inks looked like, how they blended, the colours they gave you. So these are just a few examples using different colours. So on here I've used the Juicy Pineapple, the Early Sunrise and the Strawberry Sundae, just to give it that sort of really firecracker look. This is Tranquil Waters and Deep Ocean, and all I've done with that is I've done Tranquil Waters really lightly, then gone in a little bit heavier, and then done the Deep Ocean in the middle. And this, believe it or not, was yellow. Okay, so the yellow on top of something else gives you a completely different colour. This one is Strawberry Sundae and the Spiced Plum, totally different again. And this is just cut and stenciled and embossed and just put on the actual card base. So this is stenciled directly onto the card blank, so you don't have to cut it out, you don't have to emboss it. And then this one has the layering done on it, and you can see here one of the beautiful butterflies that I did in a live a few weeks ago, which I said I would use. So on here, on all of these, I've used the foiled and plain sentiments. I've used the texture stamps, which you might know are my favourites. I've used the WOODGRAIN SLIMLINE embossing folder. I've also used the bubble wrap stencil to do the background on this one here. I've also used the vertical stamps and dies. I've also used the Builder Sentiment collection. That's where that sentiment came from, that Hugs sentiment. And of course the fabulous bubble squares. So those were the Blooming Marvellous. Then I thought I'd better try a different one, so I went with the Spring Anemone, and the only colours I've used on here are, again, the yellow and the Tranquil Waters. I've used the texture set, and I've used the Juicy Pineapple and Early Sunrise on this, and that's all I've used. I think I've used a little bit of red, which is the Strawberry Sundae, just in the very middle and on the berries. But again, I've made my own greens using those two colours. So the Spring Anemone is such a beautiful set. And then I've used the Hello Love dies. So the other thing I wanted to show you was, this is the Blooms and Berries. Again, a beautiful, beautiful set. Sort of based on the wildflower spray that came out quite a while ago, but sort of, so they sort of sit like that. They sit any way you like, really, but I think that was how they were designed. And again, such a beautiful die set. Now I did this the other way round. You know, I always tend to stencil, die cut and then emboss. Well, these two I did the other way round, and you'll notice that there's more white on here where the petals are, so it just gives you a different look. and I've used the same colours on both. The reason I'm not going to use them both on one card is that the greens are quite different, so I'll use them on separate cards. But I didn't clean my stencils off, and all I've done is used a brush and used what ink was left on the stencil to make this last one. And the veins on the leaves here are done with cobblestones. So cobblestones is a beautiful grey colour, and I just think that grey just lifts those leaves a bit. I just think it's beautiful, and that is just stenciled direct onto a piece of card and then cut out and matted and layered quite simply, really. But it just shows you that you don't need to emboss, you don't need to cut out the die cut when you've done it. This one wasn't done with Lisa's inks. I did this before my inks arrived, so this is mainly Wilted Violet and the poison one, the really dark purple. But again, just beautiful blending. This is the texture stamp in the background, and then the banners from the vertical sentiments that I showed you. But I just think that the versatility is great. Now, I said there was no brown, didn't I? But I've made brown from 3 different colour combinations this morning. So this one is a red-green combination. I did them very quickly, so if you spent more time on them, you would get a better brown. But I just think, looking at the different variations, that was a red-green combination. This one's an orange-blue combination. And again, totally different brown to that one, but browny colours. And then this one was yellow and purple. And I went really light with the yellow and really light with the purple, but you could go a lot darker and you'd get a really darker brown. You can see I went a little bit heavy here, but that's because I forgot to dab my ink off. So, you know, it's really, they're just such versatile ink pads, I can't tell you. So for those of you that haven't already seen it, the document that's in the group that I've put on, I know I've typed the post and put the file on, but this was a joint effort. Myself and Miriam and Lisa spent some time yesterday afternoon trying to think of all the questions that people would ask and the things that people would want to know before we put this together. So there is a little chart that sort of basically says yes it will or no it won't, and then we've sort of gone into a little bit more detail with the question of, can I emboss with both types of ink pads? So up here you'll see where it says embossing, it says no with pigment ink and yes with the blending ink. That is true. If I show you this, I did this embossing the other day. Now this is the black. I know the black isn't out yet, but it will be. And I have to say, I've always used VersaFine Clair. Not anymore. This is my go-to black from now on. It's beautiful and it embosses a dream. It's absolutely fabulous. This is the blending ink. This is Tranquil Waters, and again embosses beautifully. And then this is the pigment ink. Now normally with a pigment ink you would be able to emboss with it, but Lisa's pigment ink is unique. It's a very fast drying pigment ink, which is unusual, and it doesn't emboss because it dries so quickly. There isn't time for the embossing powder to adhere to the ink before it's dried. Okay, so no for the pigment, but yes for the other two. If you wanted to colour with your alcohol markers, you can with all 3 of them, but you need to heat set it. So make sure that once you've stamped it, heat set it with your gun, with your heat gun, and make sure that you leave it to one side for sort of 5-10 minutes before you add inks. Now I chose really light coloured inks for this, just to show you that there is no bleeding on there at all, but that's because I've stamped it and then I've heat set it, and then I've left it to one side for sort of 10 minutes before I've added my Copic markers to it. But they all work. They're fabulous. Will it stamp sentiments? Yes it will. Will it stamp detail? Yes it will. You can see how much detail it will stamp. If you're stamping with the pigment ink, I'd stamp it twice. So if I show you on this one, this is the huge sunflower, the off the edge sunflower. Now this is stamped with blending ink, and if you can see here, if I just make sure you can see it all in shot, you've lost a little bit of detail here because it's a blending ink, so it sort of soaks into the paper a little bit more. Whereas if you look at the other sunflower, which is stamped with the pigment ink, you can see it's picked up every single bit of detail in there. And I've stamped that twice, and it is fabulous. If you're a stamper, go for the pigment inks. If you're a stenciler and a blender, go for the blending inks. If you do a bit of both, well, why not have both? They are awesome, I've got to be honest. So as I say, the document's in the files. I will put a little slideshow of all the cards that I've made at the end of the video when I edit it and put it into YouTube. So I hope I've answered some of your questions. So when you're stamping with the pigment ink, and I've said I would suggest that you stamp it twice, that's when your platform's going to come into its own, because you know that you're going to be stamping in exactly the right place. It's a must. If you're stamping, for me, a stamping platform is a must. It's those extra little dies that give you the chance to do some sort of layering with your cards. I just think is like this. I just think that looks fabulous. You could do something like this in a frame, sort of in a box frame, for a gift. What a super gift. I think that would just look fabulous. There are endless possibilities, endless. So yeah, that's me for today. Sorry I've run over a little bit, but I just wanted to try and give you as much information as I could about these fabulous, stunning ink pads. And remember, Lisa's embossing folders, best on the market. Nothing to touch them, honestly. Promise you, you will not be disappointed. So have a fabulous week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you all again on Thursday morning. Have a great week, everybody. Bye for now.